Well, here we are. It is Friday, December 2nd, 2022, and this is our weekly video. All of you know we could do this every Friday. We take a look and see what's been going on in the auction market, see what news there is to talk about, try to find some interesting things. And this week it's been pretty quiet over on the live auctioneers section and over on the global member pages because not a lot of auctions closed this week. They had a bunch of auctions that ended last week, as we all know. Malay Brothers and those fellows. There's a couple of good sales up there right now, particularly for China trade collectors. Check out page 1. It's loaded and that kind of thing. But until we get into the new year, don't expect to see a lot of new auctions on. But there are a few that came up. There's one that we talked about on. If you haven't seen, if you're a global user, there's a global video that we just put up on the member page this morning about a very interesting sale that's taking place over in Stockholm. So check that out. Now, other news is the Tijan sale, which I mentioned last week. I think we put the catalog up. That starts in 5 days. It's a pretty good looking auction. They get some nice things, and we'll see how they do. But there's a lot of material in here that's affordable for the typical collector. Things that are under $5,000. Some of it's under $1,000. And then there's some major lots like the double gourd vase shown here. This really nice looking pot. It's probably Jiajing period. Okay, it's Marken period Jiajing. Yeah, there it is. There's the mark. Heck of a nice vase. And it'll do very well. It's got a 150 to 200,000 euro estimate. I suspect it'll get there. It's a pretty nice looking pot. But there's lots of other pieces in here as well that are much more reasonably priced. And there's a whole little row of Kangxi wares up here, export bottles and that kind of thing. Lots of nice material, a lot of blue and white, a lot of 17th and 18th century porcelain. So it's definitely worth checking out. And there's some later Qing pieces as well. But do check that out, all right? It's worth the time. It's worth a look. All right, the other thing is coming up, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit because it's sort of an interesting thing, and many of you look on the Sotheby site sometimes. You don't see many unreserved auctions on there, and this is part 2 of the Hotung sale. Sir Joseph Hotung, part 2. They've done numerous sales for his collection. He died, I think, in 2020. But he was a phenomenal Asian art collector. He had Japanese and Chinese things, and they've done very focused auctions on his very top pieces for the most part. But there are other top pieces that didn't get into those sales. We're going to talk about a couple of them that are now online or are going to be auctioned. And this particular sale is a pretty interesting one. All of it is unreserved. This is a completely unreserved auction. And there's a lot of nice material in here. We're going to go through a few of them. And there's also silver and chandeliers and wall sconces and tables and girandoles and tub chairs and fireplace equipment, all kinds of great stuff. And, if you click Chinese art, there's no harm in putting a nice looking mahogany chest underneath a vase. And this is a great way to buy them. Typically, the prices on a lot of these sales for a bench-made 18th century chest is less than what you'd pay in a regular furniture store for a bench-made piece, much less. And it's got some real age to it, and the wood quality was so much better then because they were using old-growth woods. All right, but one of the pieces that's in this sale that caught my eye was this very brightly colored, almost cherry red, flambe glazed, late Qing, probably Guangxu period vase. It's 15 inches tall. The shape makes you think it's probably 8 or 10 inches if you look at shapes of vases a lot. This is a shape that you often attribute to or think of as being in the 8 to 10 or 12 inch range maybe. This one is 15 inches. It's much bigger, and the glaze is wonderful on it. It's beautifully glazed. This is a truly beautifully glazed porcelain. No matter when it was made, if this was made in the 18th century, I'd say it was made in the late 19th century. It still was very, very good. The bottom of it looks absolutely fine. You always want to look at the bases. That's what the bottom should look like, nice and white, a little bit irregular in places, but very, very nice. No reserve. And so far, it's got a one pound bid. That's the bid so far. And when they say no reserve, they mean no reserve. I mean, it started out at a pound. All right, and one of the things you can always do, if you're wondering what the reserve situation is, if this little blue banner doesn't appear, look below it. And if you see that box and the word reserves next to it, and with this box above it, it generally means the lot is unreserved. If it has this little box, and you can click on that and it'll explain it. And a lot of people never get that far, so it's a good thing to know. Here's a nice sweetmeat set. Qing Dynasty, also probably Guangxu era, late 19th century. It's got a 1 pound opening bid requirement. It's 9 dishes, beautifully decorated with auspicious bats and peaches and Shao characters and all that good business. Nice looking lacquer cover with silk balls in gilt all over it. It's a complete set, including the box, which is a great thing. And you sort of figure it this way: each dish is probably worth $100 to $150. So they estimated it at 1,000 to 1,500 pounds, which is right about right. But it could go for less. It's unreserved. So keep that in mind. Here's the rest of the box and with the interior covers and lids and so forth. It's a nice looking set. Right now, it's got no bids, and it's a 1 pound opening bid. So get over there and leave bids on this stuff. And then you have this very nice blue and white Vietnamese jar, 15th, 16th century, very classic with the big peony blossoms on them, done during the China's Ming period, of course. This is Vietnamese ware, beautifully done, and they adopted the design obviously from the Chinese, and they were under the umbrella of the Chinese Empire, under the Ming Empire at that time. They were tribute state to it. And this is a beautiful jar. It's got 2 bids up to 50 pounds, $4,000 to $6,000 estimate. It's about 10 inches tall, so it's a nice size, very, very attractive looking porcelain. And other things, I'm just going to show you these just as an aside. This is just a little side trip because I love good furniture. And Mr. Hotung had some pretty nice furniture. And now this is a George II style mahogany chair, which means it probably wasn't made during George II period, but made after that. It might have been made in the 20th century. But it's all bench made, and the workmanship on it is exceptional. The form is perfect, very comfortable. This is a wonderful piece of furniture, and it's got about probably a $4,000 upholstery job on it. All right, and you get all of it, and the estimate is just 500 to 700 pounds. If you like, and if you went to a good furniture store today that had custom and bench made and bespoke furniture, a chair like this would cost you $5,000 to $7,000 easy. And here it is. You get the chance to pick one up and own it for a long time. Elegant, very tasteful, and 500 to 700 pound estimate. And so far it has no bids. And the same goes for this table. And this is a period table. This is a 1740s George II table with ball and claw feet. And what's very unusual about it is the brass inlay. The British, the fellow that did this, John Shannon, it's attributed to John Shannon because John Shannon was a British cabinet maker who opened up his business in the 1730s in England. And they didn't know much about him until the 1960s, the mid-1960s, when the keeper of the furniture at the, I think the Victoria and Albert Museum or the Palace Museum, they had some furniture with this strange brass inlay in it because the French used brass to inlay furniture all the time. The Germans did, the Swiss did. But you don't see it very often in English, you never saw it in English furniture. But John Shannon started doing that, and this was probably one of his earlier tables, if it dates to 1740. And here you have this, again, this brass inlay that's been worked, and you can see the incise decoration, and it was something very typical of him. And they didn't say it was by him, but they say certainly in the manner of. And that may be because there isn't enough known about this cabinet maker and enough examples that can be absolutely identified to him. So they play it safe by say manner of John Shannon. But it's 1740, and at that time in 1740, he was really the only guy in England doing this kind of work that early on. Later, there were more of them, of course, in the 1770s and so forth, but 1760s. But very early on, he was really about the only game in town doing this. And this is a wonderful table. It's estimated at 2,500 to 4,000 pounds. It's got no bids currently, and it's early mahogany. It's that very fine, either Cuban or Honduran mahogany they had access to, that they were just starting to use around this period, because prior to that it was all walnut. And then the walnut trees were getting depleted, so they were forced to import mahogany, which a lot of the people in the wood industry in England at that time opposed for a long time, because it was cutting into the walnut market, and they didn't want to sell out their market, and they began importing mahogany because they found out that it carves better, and it has a really wild graining and a beautiful warm red color. So anyway, this is just a side trip away from Chinese stuff, but I've always enjoyed good furniture, and this is a beautiful piece. And like I said, get a nice piece of English or American furniture, French furniture, put your porcelain on it. It looks great. And then the baluster vase. This is a Korean example. It's mid-19th century. It's not perfect, all right. But vases like this, when they're perfect these days, are bringing $5,000 to $7,000 pretty regularly. Sometimes they bring 10 or 20, depending on the decoration. This one is very nicely decorated. It's right in the mid-range of the better pieces. It's got some damage up around the mouth, as I recall. Let me see what I can find out where it is. Yeah, up here. It's got some pieces that were put back in. But it's got a 100 to 200 pound estimate. And were it not for this business up here and a couple of hairlines, it would have a $3,000 to $5,000 or a $4,000 to $6,000 estimate. So there you have, you got a chance of buying one of these. If you've always wanted one of these dragon vases, this is a good one. And it's 20 inches tall. It's a good size one. It's not a little one. Because they made some that were 15 or 16 inches. This is on the upper end of the size scale for these. And it's just got an estimate of 100 to 200 pounds. So check that out. That's a pretty good buy. And then this, if you like contemporary and 20th century paintings, this is a folio of 5 John Baolin paintings. He's a listed artist. You can look him up. He's on Mutual Art. He was born in 1942. Very skilled, classic 20th century work, as you can tell here by looking at the style, the sort of loose ink style with these cherries hanging off, the black, and this here inscribed and sealed by him. And he doesn't turn up a lot in auction. There was one that turned up at Bonham's a couple of years ago or so, and it brought $37,000. But it was a scroll. It was nice, but it wasn't stylistically any better than these. These are really nice. And right now it's got 2 bids. It's up to 50 pounds, and there's a $3,000 to $5,000 estimate. And if it can be bought within that range or less, I think it's a fabulous thing to buy if you like contemporary Chinese inkwork and Chinese paintings. It's very, very nice. And then the palm wood brush pot. Palm wood is this swirly wood. It looks almost like fur, or that kind of thing. And if it's running horizontally, it can look like mountains, like ranges of mountains, like a stone painting. And here, this very nicely grained wood, and beautiful patterning in it, nicely shaped. Late Qing, probably second half of the 19th century or so. But $300 to $500 estimate. So if you like brush pots and you're not in a position to chase, like the Sheng collection that we talked about this week, that had those great Hanwha Li pots for $10,000 to $60,000 a piece. This is something that's it's sort of within the range of everybody, which is a good thing. And this is aesthetically a very nice pot. It's beautiful. It's got this very bold knot in it. I like that. I like the way it swirls. The wood grain on this thing is fascinating. And it's in excellent shape. 300 to 500 pounds. All right, and then other things that are coming up. This is another part of the Hotung collection. This stuff is not reserved. This is the part that has reserves on it, I'm sure. But they have things like this. This very, very nice transitional period sleeve vase. It's a good size. What is it? What the heck was it? It was like 18 inches tall, and very reminiscent of the stuff that we saw earlier this week, of course, from the Butler collection. Really great quality. This is a very finely painted transitional vase, and I love how the mountains swell up. The way they did the rocks and so forth, the layering that you see on transitional wares, you see them done the same way on Kangxi wares and Qinlong porcelains and so forth. And then they're sort of wrapping and engulfing around this palace or this castle above all else, above everything, and then this grove of trees growing up the hill behind it. It's just a very attractive scene. and then you have the mist coming down through the mountains, and in the foreground you have this fellow sitting on the boat with his gourd, sort of looking up wistfully at his surroundings. It's just a wonderful painting, aesthetically. It's estimated at 30 to 50,000 pounds. It'll probably get there because that's what transitional pieces have been doing lately. They've been doing absolutely fabulously well. And then this is something from his collection too. And this is actually at a furniture and decorative art sale. And many of you recognize it right away. It's a Yuan Dynasty relief work blue and white platter, extremely rare from the Mongol era. And they did these by molding the dish. And here you have these relief areas in white, and then behind it in the low areas they colored it in blue and did this sort of fish row decoration or netting. Some places it looks like nets, but typically it more looks often like fish row to me. And then they outlined the lotus pods and so forth, and then you have this very attractive pair of ducks swimming in the middle and so forth, and it's all barb rimmed. It's a great charger. It's estimated at 700,000 to £1 million. So they have pretty high hopes for it. And if you like this kind of thing, I mentioned him before, but the ceramics expert used to be at Sotheby's, the Islamic department, and he worked with the Chinese department. But he's made a life study and fascination of blue and white porcelains. And he wrote a book. His name is John Carswell. And if you don't have his book on blue and white and you're interested in this topic, get the book because he really goes through it. He's a very good writer. Sometimes books on ceramics and so forth, it can be a sleeping pill. He writes very vividly. He's a good writer. I did some business with him years ago. He was awfully nice. And it was over at Isnik, a piece of Isnik ware that I had that we sold through Sotheby's, and he was terrific to deal with. Very educational, very forthcoming with information. Nice man. Anyway, this is what the back of it should look like. And one of the problems they're having today is that when they're making the copies of these, because they're turning up everywhere, as we know, they turn up down in Florida and certain auction houses in Georgia and California and other places. They have learned to use sort of a rusty water mix to put on the porcelain before it's fired, so it flashes up sort of a rusty maroonish red off color thing. And if you're interested in these wares, this is what the back of one of these should look like. This is the direct result of iron oxide, iron in the paste when they fired it, and it oxidizes, turns this color. But you're going to be so careful because they are constantly tinkering with how they do this. The reality is that there are very few of these left in the world at this point that have not been identified and scooped up into major collections and museums. The Artible Shrine has them. The Topkapi Saray Museum has them. In India, there's a number of them, but they're in some at the Palace Museum, of course, and that kind of thing. But the chances of one of these turning up in America in some unrecognized situation, other than a major auction house for sale, is zero. I'm just going to say it. There have been there was one that turned up. It was a reversed blue glazed. It was either early Ming or Yuan. I think it was Yuan. But at any rate, it turned up in an auction in Canada. It still brought $1 million, and it was barely advertised, the auction. But at any rate, be very careful if you come across one that you think is one of these, because the chances of it being authentic, I'm just going to say it is you're more likely to hit the $1.5 billion Powerball lottery than you are to find one of these floating around in some rural auction out of the blue. It just doesn't happen. Okay. All right. And then over here to this. This was the sale that just finished up in New York yesterday. This was China's 5,000 years. And this is a sale that they run. They call them 5,000 years. And it's basically a little bit of everything from every period and not necessarily the most expensive. And this is a place for people to buy. And again, you see these very lovely little no reserve stickers on many of the lots. All right, and that literally means that's what it means, no reserves. They're going to sell it no matter what. And this sale overall did very, very well. There were some good results. And I want to go through it because it's a kind of thing where, just leave a bid on it. Just go in. I say it all the time, leave a bid. Just leave a bid. All right, and one of the things I wanted to talk about was this Famille Rose Republic period box with the geese on the cover. I had a bunch of inquiries about this week. I had several people that were interested in this box because it was so well done, and they were all sort of Republic buyers that we know of. And a couple I didn't know buy this kind of thing, but this was a very attractive box, beautifully decorated, made during the Republic period, early 20th century. Very lovely raised relief enamels on here, and then you have the Buddhist symbols with all the gilding and beautifully shaded, and just a terrific box. And everybody had asked, I said it's going to bring probably close to the high estimate, probably 5,000 or so. And it did. It did, and it's just because these are fairly predictable at this point. And I did hedge it a little bit and say to a number of people, it could bring more. Could of course go 6,000 or 8,000, because in this world, this Republic wares, this happens a lot, where they have a $2,000 to $3,000 estimate and the thing brings 10,000. All right. It doesn't necessarily mean anything anymore, because buyers are going to tell you what the thing is worth, no matter what the auction house thinks, and no matter what the seller thinks. On any given day, the audience is going to tell you what your piece is worth, and if it's worth more, you are wrong, and if it's worth less, you're wrong than you thought. Okay, that's all there is to it. People never mind when something brings a lot more than they had thought in their head that it was worth. But it goes 10 cents under, they get pretty upset. It's a strange psychology. At any rate, this is another thing that I think this was older than, to me this looked older than what they cataloged it as. They cataloged this as a 19th century copper red Qing brush washer. And it's a really nice one, all right? But when I looked at it, the shape, the glaze, the texture of the glaze, and the bottom of it, this to me looks more 18th century, and if it is 19th century, then it's early Chai Qing period. But I thought the bottom of this looked very 18th century to me. The way it was done, the way the glaze meets, the color of the paste, the shaping of the foot, and how it was trimmed and all that. That looks to me, and then the shape of the bowl, the shape of the piece itself, just beautifully potted. And the audience liked it, that's for sure. It was estimated at $2,000 to $3,000. It went for $8,820. And then on to this. This was a rare thing. I had a couple of inquiries about these. And it's a pair of Guangxu period hat stands or sleeve vases. Some people don't think these are hat stands because they don't have holes in the sides. And I tend to view these as just sleeve vases. But there's sort of a debate about it. I suppose technically they are hat stands. But anyway, these are Guangxu market period, though. And hat stands with this bat pattern from the Guangxu era that are authentic are very rare. They don't turn up very often at all. And these were beautifully done. They looked like they were in wonderful condition. And the foot rims, the bottoms looked absolutely fine. The way that the round, smooth, white foot with little bits of impurities in them and so forth, but neatly trimmed around the inside. And the mark, of course, is done perfectly. But the marks on the copies these days are generally done pretty perfectly as well. So you can't go by that. I've had people say to me, well, if the mark is perfect, then the piece is authentic. And I would say, no, not at all. They've perfected copying marks now very well for many decades. So you can't go by that. But always go by the artwork, the quality of the porcelain, how the enamels look, and are the enamels consistent with the period. Often on copies, you'll see colors that didn't exist in the period that it's trying to be from. 18th century color palettes had certain tones and shades they were capable of, and there were certain colors that they just didn't use yet. So you always want to look at the colors one by one and say, is that color consistent with, a Qinlong porcelain or a Genoa porcelain or something like that. You have to really pay attention to the colors, the shading of the colors. All right, and then over to this, and this is part of that debate. We've talked about it before. Was these big Kangxi famille noir vases, and those of you that aren't familiar with it, the story was that for many years people thought these were Kangxi period, and back in the 1890s, the 1920s and 30s, Western collectors and institutions were gobbling these up like crazy because they thought they were just so striking, so handsome, so Edwardian, and black and very austere looking, very masculine looking, and beautifully enameled. And but people were always perplexed by the texture of the black on some of these vases, in particular, because they looked like they'd been Earlshire painted on. They don't the color the black enamel was not of the same quality of the rest of the enamels. And what they found was, doing studies, they found that in the Kangxi period, they did produce famille noir vases, but they were small. They were 10, 12, 14, 15 inches, occasionally a pair of sleeve vases, maybe 18 inches, but that's it. And what they now seem to are admitting that any of these famille noir vases that are over 20, 24 inches tall and up have all been redecorated. And what they did was they would take a white ground Kangxi vase. So imagine this black area is all in white. And in the late 19th and early 20th century, they would scrape the black off, scrub it off the vase, get it off very carefully, meticulously remove it, and then re-enamel it in black. And a lot of museums ended up with these. The Philadelphia Art Museum deaccessioned a bunch of them a few years ago. I think there's a few of them still lingering around over at the Met. They may want to keep a couple just as studies because it's an interesting phenomenon. And if you read the description, it says large famille noir, magpie and prunus, yen vase, porcelain 18th century. The enamels later added. That's their way of getting around it. And this was a big vase. It was 28 inches tall. And if you look back here, here's the collection. It started out in the Salting collection, which was a major Asian art collector, and then the collection of James Garland, John Pierpont Morgan, Duveen Brothers, the collection of John D. Rockefeller up until 1960, the collection of Winthrop Rockefeller Charitable Trust, and then gifted to a Southern institution in 2019. And that's the history of it. So originally it was bought by George Salting, and he was a major collector. And I'm sure he was told this was a rare Kangxi example, and he probably paid a lot of money for it. At any rate, this time through it sold for $15,120. And if this was a white vase in this size, and they hadn't done that, it probably would have brought $50,000 to $70,000. So that's the lesson. And the same goes for this. This is one of these sleeve vases, a beaker vase. This is one that was redecorated. And if you look at the low areas, you can actually see the texture, where the enamel just looks a little funny on here. But this is a Kangxi vase that's been redecorated black again. And the provenance, the collection of Prince de Bern, 1887, according to the label. And then this Herbert Stern collection. And then Parrish Watson, which was and then Frank Partridge, New York, who were two very influential. Parrish Watson was one of the top decorators in New York for many, many years. And Frank Partridge was one of the leading dealers, scholars of all kinds of art, not just Chinese art, but he knew a lot about English, European paintings, you name it. Frank Partridge knew it. And then from there it went to John D. Rockefeller. And then it went to the Winthrop Rockefeller Trust, and then it went to the Southern Institution. So it appears that Mr. Rockefeller was the impetus for this collection, because this also ended up with the Rockefellers. So he was on a binge of buying famille noir that had been redecorated. and they now know that he got hoodwinked, basically. But at any rate, this time around, this was estimated at $4,000 to $6,000. It sold for $8,000. All right, and then other things that were interesting in the sale was this very nice biscuit Kangxi biscuit pot with enamel decoration, with a chimera creating the handle, or a qilong. And let's see, Kangxi period estimated at $4,000 to $6,000, and it went for $5,000, which I think was a very good buy. This is a really nice bit of porcelain and unusual. And there's the base to it. And they've got this nifty little brass stand for it. And there's no history here. It doesn't say who it came from. They had two in the sale, by the way. There were two of these. I assume they came from the same person. They were nearly identical in style, and one was yellow, one was green. That was the only difference. And then the big crackware blue and white Ming Wan Li dish. This was nice size. It was 13 inches in diameter. But what was really nice about this was the decoration. For Wan Li, was particularly good. Very crisp, very clean, nicely drawn, not a lot of bleeding, not overly dark. The glazed areas looks very, very good. The barb rim was in good condition all the way around. It was just a really good example And the back of it, as you can see, is not all cluttered up with a lot of kiln grit like you see on a lot of Wanli wares. Sometimes you see it, the whole back of it is just is sand from the kiln. This one has almost none. Remarkably clean for a Wanli dish. And I think somebody got a good buy on it, $2,000 for one and this good of a quality. The quality was so good. The estimate was reasonable as hell, and it went for $2,000. So there you are. All right, and then the Indo-Chinese book. This sold. This was. You always want to check other categories at Sotheby's when they have things. This was in a sale of a fellow's library of books, not just Chinese stuff in particular, just a library reference with a lot of engravings and prints from the 17th, 18th, 19th century and so forth. And he had this Indo-Chinese school, Begum's Book of Birds, 18th century. And it caught my eye because I used to own a nearly identical painting to this. If this isn't the actual one, we sold it years ago, about 10 or 12 years ago. But exactly the same painting. And mine came from the estate of Amelia Peabody in Boston. And I bought it from a dealer that was handling the estate many, many, many years ago. And it was a great painting. And this is the full folio, though. This has all the pictures. This I just absolutely love, the one of the parrot, with all of the insects on the tree branches and all the little growths. But look at the bugs. It's terrific. And the beautifully colored bird. Absolutely superb. Absolutely superb. The shade of red, that ruby red, just absolutely beautiful. And then everything sort of just hanging down gently off of it. They date it to the 1780s. But this was a book of 8, let me see, how many were there? I want to get it right. 35 watercolors were in this lot. It went for £37,000, but to get the whole set and 35 of them in one swoop, I think was a terrific buy. And there's also some other, there's some later miniature watercolor drawings of a bird, and then there's some other inserted things, and it comes in a silk-lined folio and all that business. I think they even threw in a couple of pictures of watercolors of junks. But this was a neat lot, and framed up, these would be great. And these are good-sized paintings too. These are they're like 18 by 20 inches each. They're good size. So there you are. And this stuff. Sotheby's also, and I think Christie's does it too, is if they have unsold lots or lots that didn't get paid for or something, they will put them up for sale on their site. There is a for sale section on their site. This is something they should have done years ago. They do it now. And there's a couple of things on there. Some of the pieces I think they're asking way too much money, to be honest. I think the prices are a little bit silly. But this is not. This is a pretty good deal. $1,850 for all three pieces. And some of you may remember a couple of weeks ago, we just had two of these vases like this, and I think they sold for, you can look it up on Live Auction News, but I think they sold for $1,000 or $1,500. And it doesn't have this nicely shaped wasted vase here with it. And it makes a nice looking, nice presentation. And they're basically saying they're about $600 a piece, which is a perfectly fair deal. Perfectly fair. That's sort of eBay pricing. And then this. These are stupendous with shipping. That caught my eye. Complimentary shipping on these. These are enormous. These are 25 inches tall. Okay, mid-19th century, but absolutely beautiful quality decoration. The colors are exceptional. Crisp, very strong. You have that wonderful blue decoration that goes around the scene here. Usually these frames are done either within a Greek keyboard or something else. This is a rose mandarin pattern, and they use a light blue dragon sort of coiling around the cartouches of all the figures. Very, very nice. And these brightly gilded chimeras and food lions on the neck, ruffled rims. And it's free shipping. They're $9,000, which is, we've seen a lot of these vases in this size sell for more. There was a pair we saw not long ago that went for $15,000, and they weren't as pretty as these. So it's something to think about if you're looking for a big pair of vases and you don't want to hassle around with the shipping. They're shipping them for you, because to ship these vases out of New York to anywhere in the U.S. Would probably cost you conservatively $800 to $1,500 to have them properly shipped and crated. So it's a pretty good. I think that's a really good deal, and they take care of all of it for you. Just food for thought. Just food for thought. Alrighty. Some of the other stuff they have on there, they're asking nutty amounts of money. I think that's dealing with unreasonable consigners again. But anyway, now what's been going on over at eBay this week? Back to our little world. A lot of things sold. There was nothing in there that was too extraordinary. There was this was nice. It was a Republic period light blue, which was an unusual color for these. A light blue ground, sort of done in the manner of they call Empress Dowager wares, with the blackbird and the branches and all that. It's in that influence of decoration. Here is this grisaille enamel that was so popular then. These were done a little later. These look like they were probably done after the end of the Guangxu period, in the Empress Dowager's departure from this planet, but maybe done in 1915 or something, not that long after, but very attractive. And they sold the planter and under tray sold for $1,295, which is right in there, and it had a very nice color. I love the color of it. I love that light blue. All right, and there was this nice Kangxi period charger. This was a seller over in the Netherlands that had this up. They've got a few things also, some more things that are out. It'll be on the newsletter page this week once it gets updated. I think there's 2 or 3 lots from them in there. But there's this nice Kangxi dish. It was around 13.5 or so inches in diameter, as I recall. 35 centimeters. No, it's bigger than that. So it's about 14 inches or so. It had a hairline and a couple of small chips, and it went for $610, but perfectly reasonable price. And I like the lotus flower in the middle. It's rather nice. It's a good looking plate. And then there was the lime green ground Kong style vase. Let me see. This was the one that they had. I think, did this have a China mark on the bottom? Yeah. It had China on it, so they called it 19th century, which it could be technically, because the China mark started getting put on in 1895, right before the end of the period. But more likely, this was made after that, very end of the Qing dynasty, or possibly the early Republic period. But it was very pretty yellowish green background, classic shape. I like the butterflies on it. And this closed yesterday for $413. Not bad for these, because we've seen that these have gained a lot of appreciation. They used to sell those vases. If they were marked China on the bottom, they were about $30. Not that many years ago. You could just buy them. Nobody wanted them because of the China mark. And then they found out that a lot of the times that China mark can be removed with fingernail polish remover. I know a guy that sold a lot of them, and he found out later that he could remove it with fingernail polish remover, and he kicked himself because he said he would have gotten 3 times as much money if he just cleaned them off a little bit. The life of a dealer. All right, and then there was this. This was from the ceramics and collectibles guys up at Shangri-La in the Netherlands. This very nice little transitional period Tianqi to Chongsen porcelain dish. Again, in keeping with the stuff from the Butler family collection. This was a nice provincial little plate, good color, good condition, $286. There was no damage to it at all. And then on to this big Sunkai figure of a seated Kuan Yin. This is an early 20th century one. There's the potter's mark on it. This is one. It's mimicking Ming wares, obviously. Nicely done, though. This is a nicely done piece, and it's big. The face was very well potted and all that. It's probably made during the Republic period, but you can see how big it is. It's very good size. And looks like a number of people had to have it, and they paid $2,938 for it. Again, Republic stuff is really, really doing just fine these days. All right, and then over here to this piece of silver, a nice-looking silver bowl. All incise decorated and all that business. It's got a mark on the bottom, and you can go. I didn't look up the mark on this. I probably should have. I apologize. Stubbsy Wubsy. Oh, he's the seller. Okay, he gets good things. He's a good seller. And he didn't look up the buyer, who the silversmith was, but it's a really nice looking piece of silver. Beautifully incise decorated. Here's the bottom of it. Nice looking piece of silver. And it did fine at the end. It brought $944. All right, and there'll be lots of new stuff added to the newsletter page this week. So be sure to check it out. We'll send you an email. We send out emails every Friday. Within 2 minutes of the thing being finished, the emails get sent out. So you can all go check out and see what we found. There was this very pretty a rose canton plate, mid 19th century, maybe a little after, but awfully pretty, awfully nice decoration. Crisp colors. The gilding was in good shape, vibrant enamels, and it ended up selling for $310. But it was good size. It was 34 centimeters, so about a 14-inch plate, and that was a pretty good buy, I think, to hang on a wall, enjoy it, and it looked very, very good. And we'll have a lot more of them coming over here this week when we update the newsletter page. It'll have everything in here will be replaced by the time you get to it. The Marco Polo sale finished. I think he did pretty well. It looked all right. I heard some prices. I think they're having a little trouble getting the prices, figuring out how to get the prices posted. It was Carlos' first sale on his own, so everybody's got to cut him a little bit of a break here, because we need more auctioneers that really love the business, and Carlo loves the business. So I'm really hopeful that he was enthused after this was over to do them again, because I think he did a very fine job for a first time doing your own auction. It's a big burden. It's lots of things to do, and I'm hopeful. All right, I like to see everybody do well, so it's fine. But all of this will be gone by the time you come over here, and we'll put up whatever's we've come across for the week that we've saved up to share. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the newsletter page, it's free. You just click this button, give us your email address, and you'll get notified every Friday as soon as the page gets updated. And of course, you'll get the update link for the the weekly video. So there you are. All right, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed to us yet on YouTube, please do. Have a great weekend. I'll be back next week. I've got a few things we're working on to share with everybody, and it's always something going on. All right, but have a wonderful weekend, and get rested up for next week. Okay, bye-bye.